So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 70th Assembly District's Candidates Forum. Tonight's candidates are Joshua Clennon, Jordan J.G. Wright, and Shana Harmongoff. My name is Sideria Asbury Crestfield, and I'm honored to be your host tonight. Sean Hill and I are two of the co-founders of the Greater Harlem Coalition. And this event is sponsored by the Greater Harlem Coalition and the Mount Morris Park Community Improvement Association. We're all united in the mission to make Harlem a place where everyone can thrive. At GHC, we use data to highlight the challenges our community faces. We've shown how New York City and New York State have oversaturated our neighborhood with treatment programs and shelters, serving New Yorkers from other areas outside of Harlem, contributing to systemic issues and quality of life concerns. Our goal is to locate small-scale, effective programs spread throughout all neighborhoods in New York City to reduce the concentration of such services in communities of color. Now, tonight, our focus is on three critical topics: oversaturation, structural racism, and addiction. By the end of the forum, you should have a clearer understanding of where our candidates stand on these issues. So here's a brief rundown of tonight's program. Our moderators will guide the discussion and ensure each candidate has a fair chance to speak. The forum will follow the same structure as last night's 68th Assembly Forum. Our team has worked diligently on the format, questions, and timing for both forums to give a clear view of the candidates' positions, vision, and character. We're excited about the audience Q&A, where we'll have unscripted questions that should spark lively discussions. Our team member, Brian, will keep track of time and signal when the candidates have exceeded their allotted time. So if you'd like to ask a question, please log into our Q&A, not the chat, and Sean Hill will get to as many audience questions as possible toward the end of the forum. And before we conclude tonight's event, and this is very important, we're going to ask you to participate in a poll to get your thoughts on who you are likely to vote for. And we're going to share the results of those polls with you tomorrow. So our moderator tonight is Savannah Washington. And Savannah is a professor, filmmaker, and activist. Savannah works at the Institute on Race, Power, and Political Economy at the New School, where she just organized their first Harlem Earth Day, which I attended last Saturday. Savannah's next film project, Greening of the Bronx, an Urban Garden Tale, looks at the challenges and solutions Black and brown urban environmental activists are bringing to the table in the Bronx and other urban communities of color. It's scheduled to appear on PBS spring of 2025. So please enjoy the forum, ask questions, and engage with our candidates. Let's make the most of our time together to build a better future for Harlem. Now I'd like to turn this over to the president of the Mount Morris Park Community Improvement Association, Madeline Stokely.
Thank you so much, Sideria. It is an honor for me to be the president of MMPCIA. I am in my fourth year and final year as the president of MMPCIA. Our association is a 501(c) community-based all-volunteer organization incorporated in 1981. Our catchment area covers Madison Avenue to Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard, 124th Street to 117th Street. MMPCA came about at a time when neglect by every level of government made a once glorious and elegant community a place of fear and destruction. The community of longtime residents and new arrivals came together to restore the physical and cultural beauty of the recently designated Mount Morris Park Historic District. 43 years ago, we were, as we are today, determined to ensure that our community is a place where we can live joyful lives and flourish. While we have won many battles, the war is not over. The struggle continues. We are pleased to partner with GHC in the important work of shining a spotlight on the unfair, intentionally designed structures that have resulted in the oversaturation of drug treatment facilities and the resulting consequences that fall upon our people. We hold every level of government responsible. For as the saying goes, you are either part of the problem or part of the solution. I thank the candidates for stepping up to public service challenges and participating in this evening's forum. Thank you. I now turn it over to our moderator, Savannah.
Hi, thank you, Sedaria. Thank you, Madeline. Thank you to everyone who's attending tonight, and welcome to our candidates. Thank you for your time this evening. I'd like to ask each candidate to briefly introduce themselves in 1 minute or less, and I will call you in alphabetical order by last name, and then we'll round robin that after that. So Joshua, if you could begin, briefly introduce yourself in 1 minute or less.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joshua Clennon. I'm running for New York Assembly here in the 70th District of Harlem, my home, place I've called home my entire life. The village of Harlem is a place that's nurtured me, that's educated me, and it's where I'm raising my own family as a husband and father. My journey in public service began in tragedy, losing my father at a young age in gun violence. So he was shot and killed while holding me in his arms. And that forged my commitment to give back to our community, to improve the conditions that we've been living in, and also to make a difference for the next generation coming after us. And since then, as a graduate of Penn State University for the past 10 years, I've been working diligently in public service in our community to improve the conditions, whether as treasurer and chair of district needs for Manhattan Community Board 10, advocating for more resources for our community, whether organizing events for our youth to curb gun violence, promote civic engagement, and also working hand in hand with the Greater Harlem Coalition and MMPCIA to raise awareness over the oversaturation issue, and professionally working in affordable housing, managing our low-income housing co-ops to maintain equity and generational working class families. So I plan to leverage my experiences in the New York Assembly to create transformative change for our community so that we can create a thriving Harlem for all.
Thank you. Shana?
I first want to say thank you so much, everyone, for the opportunity today. I am Shana Harmongoff. I'm a mother of 2 young adults, and they are 22 and 20. I'm a community leader and organizer. I was born and raised in Harlem by 2 parents who were both civically engaged, and I learned at an early age the importance of giving back and civic engagement. When I was 8 years old, my parents had me and my siblings volunteering at nursing homes and senior centers, which made me have a love for seniors. But I knew I wanted to do more than just listen to seniors, but I wanted to be their advocate. So I went on to law school, where I received my Juris Master degree and my Juris Doctor degree. And upon finishing graduating law school, I started working in property management, managing apartments, and then transitioned into working in state government. And I started working for a previous state senator, and the only candidate has worked in state government for a previous state senator in Harlem. The purpose of one of the functions or roles for an assembly member is to create, introduce, and vote on state legislation. And I have that experience. And a lot of our community members are tired of our elected officials saying all these things that they'll do, but not actually do it. And I'm a doer. Thank you.
Thank you. Jordan?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jordan Wright. I'm running for the New York State 70th Assembly District. I want to thank the Greater Harlem Coalition for convening this. It's a real honor for me to be here in front of you all as a candidate. As a young Black man born in the 1990s, I've already lived through the crack era, 9/11, several mass terrorist attacks, the Great Recession, a housing crisis, rollbacks of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the largest mass shooting in the United States several times over. It's a real travesty, and in this country, it's time for us to change. It's an honor to address you all as a candidate. Many of you know me because you lived in Harlem your whole life, and have grown up here and seen me throughout the district throughout the years. We've stayed through the good times and the bad times. We're not fair weather neighbors, and we've always had each other's backs. It's an honor to be here in front of you once again, in the seat that community trailblazer and the current Assembly Member Inez Dickens' seat currently holds. And it's an honor for me to have her endorsement as I run for this seat. Once again, my name is Jordan J.G. Wright. I'm running for the New York State Assembly, and thank you so much for convening this and looking forward to the next steps.
Thank you. And just for icebreaker question for each of you, in 1 minute, what's one of your favorite memories of living in Harlem? And Shana, we'll begin with you.
What is the state repeated again?
Yeah, what's one of your favorite memories of living in Harlem?
Volunteering at senior centers. And it's so funny because one of the senior centers that I actually went to Catholic school and pre-K is now a senior center. So I went to St. Benedict's and it was in the Kennedy Center. And so now there's a senior center in that, in the building, and it's Central Harlem Senior Center. So being with seniors is one of my favorite memories as a kid.
Nice. Jordan?
I think one of my favorite memories growing up in Harlem is being a part of youth programs and youth services in the area. Winning the championship in both the Harlem Little League and the Harlem Junior Knicks is really important to me. It's very special to me, specifically the Harlem Little League parade. That was always a really iconic moment for me growing up in the neighborhood. People from all around Harlem, Central, East, West, all came together for the love of baseball and the love of community. So that meant a lot to me.
Thank you. Joshua?
My favorite memory is as a kid, my grandmother used to take me to Pan Pans every single weekend without fail. And, I just love that place. And, to see that area now under the conditions that it is blighted is a reminder of why we have to fight for our community to make sure that we're building up Harlem, but doing it in a sustainable way that really caters to the needs of all of our community, our seniors, our working class families, and our young professionals.
Okay, thank you. For the following forum questions, unless otherwise noted, each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer. There may be follow-up questions as the conversation flows. And again, Brian will be our timekeeper on this. When one thinks of environmental justice, usually people think of climate change only. And communities of color, for us, environmental justice includes social justice and economic justice. For the Harlem community and communities of color, we have been burdened with all of the environmental issues that wealthier and usually whiter communities can afford to avoid, like waste transfer stations, power plants, and prisons in the Bronx, and now injection sites and other drug treatment facilities that have disproportionately been placed in Harlem. And to begin, what are some of the policies that you would introduce as Assembly member to alleviate the disproportionate burden of the drug facilities that have been placed in the 70th Assembly District? And Jordan, we'll start with you.
Thank you so much for that question. Primarily, the first thing I would look to do on day one is to introduce Assemblymember Dickens, her piece of legislation regarding the Fair Share Act and ensuring that community board districts, they can have no more than 5 of these facilities. I think it's really important that, these drug treatment facilities, they are not oversaturated in one area as they are right now in our community. So this piece of legislation, I would seek to introduce it on day one and confirm that no community board district could have any more than 5 in their vicinity. Thank you.
Joshua?
Thank you. This is such a great question, and it's an important question for our community. Harlem has been medically redlined. We've been oversaturated because other communities and other districts don't want these facilities in their own, and it's been much easier to place them here in our community. What I want to do as the next Assembly member is advance new legislation that would make sure that our state agencies like OASIS have greater regulations in the placement of these facilities to ensure that opioid treatment facilities are distributed evenly across not just New York City, but across the entire state, because the opioid epidemic is not just a an issue that's affecting communities like Harlem or affecting communities in New York City. It's affecting the entire country. And we have so many counties in our state that don't have any treatment facilities at all, which is why so many people are being bused to the Harlem community each and every single day. So I want to make sure that we're creating the regulations for the agencies to make sure that the agencies are fairly distributing the sites, and also advancing additional legislation to make sure that there are boundaries in terms of how sites are placed, and as it pertains to schools, as it pertains to senior homes and things of that nature, to make sure that we're keeping our community safe while also advancing care for our most vulnerable.
Thank you, Shana.
Hi, I too would also champion Inez Dickens' bill regarding the oversaturation of drug treatment facilities in our community. Our children walking to school have to walk over crack pipes and all type of things. Even people pass out on the streets from our brothers and sisters who are struggling with substance abuse. So there needs to be more done and legislation put in place. Not only will I champion Inez's bill when I get in office, I've been championing it now. I have been doing press conferences and rallies talking about the oversaturation of drug treatment facilities. I've also worked with other assembly people in office, as well as Assembly member Linda Rosenthal, who is the chair of the Drug and Abuse Committee. So I will continue to advocate and ally with our assembly members and government to make sure that Inez bills pass, as well as other legislation is introduced. Each district needs their fair share in Harlem, and East Harlem shouldn't be oversaturated with drug treatment facilities. Other districts, because what we're finding out is other districts, other people from other districts are coming in and utilizing our facilities. And so we need, those districts need their fair share, and the people in Harlem actually need those resources can get those resources instead of people coming in and utilizing our facilities.
Thank you. While we have an oversaturation of drug treatment facilities, we have a deficit of mental health and recovery facilities. How do you plan to address that? And we'll start with Joshua.
Thank you. I plan to address that. Mental health needs to begin with our schools, right? We need community school models where we're providing enhanced services, guidance, more guidance counselors, more mental health professionals to our young people, right? As Frederick Douglass once said, it's easier to build strong boys than it is to repair broken men, right? So we have to start at a very young age, because many young people in our community experience trauma at a very young age, like me, people who experience gun violence, or people who don't have stable situations at home, right? So we need to make sure that our young people are getting the services and the care that they need so that they can grow and, meet those academic benchmarks, and also be productive, citizens, and contribute to our local economy, and pioneer the next generation of Harlem business owners.
Thank you. Shana?
I believe we need more mental health counselors, social workers, psychotherapists walking the streets, handling cases that they're trained and qualified to do, as well as being first responders on the scene when situations call for it with police officers. There's a lot of issues that's concerning our community, but it starts with mental health. I actually want to give more resources to mental health. And also in schools as well, we need more mental health counselors in schools. And I would like there to be legislated to where before a student graduates high school, that they're mandated to take a course on mental health. That way we're normalizing our community, especially our Black and Brown community, to speak to a counselor. So that way, when they get older, they'll be productive citizens in society, and actually we're normalizing that. So bringing more mental health counselors and social workers in our schools will help our young people be able to speak about their problems and know that it's okay.
Thank you. Jordan?
Absolutely. Mental health is critically important for the Black and Brown communities, specifically as it pertains to, Black and Brown men. It's important that we're imploring that we started from the beginning when our children are the youngest, that mental health isn't stigmatized anymore. It's important that we take the models that are, currently for other communities, we bring them into our own. We're making sure that people are talking to doctors, talking to therapists from a very young age. And we need to take those models and bring them into our schools, our local district schools, our local after school programs, and making sure that it's a commitment to our young people. Because when you start young, it's easier to ensure that people grow up whole, and you can continue to make certain that we're not going to have the same issues that we currently have with our older generations. It's important that we learn from the past. It's important that we ensure that our future is bright. And to do this, it's important to make sure that our communities are not looking at these places as negatives, the mental health places. We need to put more of them in our communities. We need to make sure that, we have social workers and other mental health specialists in the precincts every day to ensure that, as these issues are coming up, we're not sending just officers to handle these, terrible situations. We are sending those who know how to handle the, potentially dire, so we don't have potentially dire consequences.
Thank you. Community Board 11 previously passed a moratorium on new sightings of homeless shelters and drug rehabilitation sites. Do you support a tool like this to help ensure that the city fully implements its own fair share policy? And Shana, we'll begin with you.
Yes, I do support this moratorium. I believe that we need to emphasize the importance of equitable resources for all communities. I would highlight the negative impact of oversaturation in marginalized communities, and I would advocate for a moratorium to ensure the distribution across the districts. Engaging with community leaders as well as organizing public forums and collaborating with advocacy groups will help raise awareness and build the consensus. Additionally, I would work closely with city elected officials to develop some transparent policies that prioritizes the equity in community input.
Thank you. Jordan?
Remind me the question again, please. I'm sorry.
Oh, Community Board 11
Yes,
previously passed a moratorium. Yeah.
Yes, I'm happy to say that as a former Community Board 11 member, I'm definitely in favor of this. Championed by Nye Whitaker, it's important that this is a model across the city, even across the state, because again, we have to be ensuring that our community is, not oversaturated. Our community is dealing with its fair share. It's important that as a community, we're not taking on the load as, Black and brown folks. It's important that these issues are taken care of by the whole, city of New York.
Thank you. Joshua?
Yeah, so the moratoriums are important, right? I served on Community Board 10 that also passed the moratorium. They're important that our community is documenting our position on these issues, but the community board is just an advisory board, right? It's not enough. We need more urgency, more action from our state representatives. I've been in, meetings with Sean Hill Sideria, with the heads of Oasis, and they seem to be intent on doing what they want and really disregarding the voices of our community. So we have to advance new legislation. A lot of candidates mentioned Inez's bill that is in the state assembly. Unfortunately, it hasn't gotten any support from any other of her colleagues in the New York State Assembly. So we need to advance new legislation that we can build a coalition around that is really focused on expanding care outside of the Harlem community rather than just restricting care. We need to make sure that people don't have the need to come to Harlem because they can get that care where they live in Staten Island, in Westchester, or wherever they are. That's the important thing and how we're going to reduce the oversaturation here in the Harlem community. And it's important that our community let our voices be heard, but we need greater action from our representatives.
Thank you. When someone in our community is battling addiction, they are treated differently than someone that lives in another part of the city. Someone in our backyard with addiction is sent to jail. Their peers are sent to Shady Oak Spa and rehab. How do you think we level the playing field for access to care? Where would you aim to increase funding, to improve care? What solutions can you offer? Sometimes potentially even before it's needed in the first place. And Jordan, we'll start with you.
Absolutely. It's important to know that we are not going to be able to fight fire with this situation. I guess to be more clear, we're not going to arrest our way out of this, We're not going to put people in, we're not going to, we're not going to rest our way out of this. We're not going to make it, it's got to be clear that our folks have to be treated with love, kindness, and compassion. There is no universe where we're going to send someone to jail and they're going to end up in a better situation than when they went in. So it's important that we're investing in a number of facilities in this neighborhood. It's important that we're investing in people have to be where they are, and investing into facilities, drug treatment facilities or what have you across the city. So you can be around your neighbors, around your community, and they can make you feel whole and they can make you feel like you're a part of them. So it's important that we continue in this fight, and it's important that we make sure that we're investing in our communities. Each community is feeling like they're a part of its own. So as you grow up, you can see the same people, understand the same problems, and look to bridge the gap together as one.
Thank you. Joshua?
Yeah, I think it's important that, we really understand the nuances of this issue. For example, New York State is a state that's been heavily reliant on methadone as the treatment. It's the go-to treatment for opioid addiction, right? But there are alternative drugs that we have not really taken advantage of, drugs such as buprenorphine, where a person afflicted with substance use disorder could get treatment directly from their primary care physician instead of having to go to a methadone center and line up and be, basically strip searched, which is a carceral system, right? But the issue is we need to fund these initiatives in the state budget, right? We need to pass more funding to expand access to buprenorphine and also remove some of the red tape that has made primary care physicians very hesitant in even offering this in their practices, right? And doctors have been advocating for this for decades in New York State. They want to be able to practice it, but the current red tape that we have in the legislature creates too many liabilities for them to even be able to financially do this without risk of being sued for a number of different things, right? So we have to pass new legislation, and we also have to pass funding in the state budget to expand access to alternative treatments so that people can get the care that they need, better quality care, and on their own terms instead of having to line up outside and be strip searched every single day.
Thank you. Shana?
Thank you. Well, one of my biggest platforms is mental health and healthcare, and I'm happy to say it's Mental Health Awareness Month. But what I will do is first I would invest in a community-based prevention initiatives, education, and early intervention programs to address the root causes of substance abuse. A lot of times there's underlying issues. People have lost their jobs. People are getting divorced. Family members have died. So there are underlying issues that we first must tackle. So there has to be investment in community-based prevention initiatives and early intervention programs. I would also support healthcare providers with training and resources to better identify treatment to treat substance abuse disorders. Oftentimes when our Black and Brown communities go into hospitals, they're treated a little bit differently. As you said, they go to different places in other areas than in our Black and Brown communities, they're arrested. So just basically training our healthcare providers on how to properly treat substance abuse disorders. I would also increase funding for mental health and counseling services. And I would also advocate for policies that destigmatize addiction and promote holistic approaches to recovery.
Great, thank you. Someone said to me once, one of the largest facilities for mental health care in the city of New York is Rikers, which is upsetting. Can you talk about how you would work with a population that has challenges, multiple challenges? What do you see moving forward, and what options are available? What can we do on, like we're using a facility like Rikers as a mental health facility, and I believe Shana is up next.
Well, again, I would invest more in mental health resources. As we know, a lot of people in Rikers, they have mental health issues. And so my number one thing would be to invest more in mental health services. And also, as people are coming out and who have been formerly incarcerated, oftentimes they feel like they are left out in the community and they don't have any resources. So we need to, when people are coming out, we need to make sure that they actually have the mental health resources that they need and actually housing information that they need as well. But as we know, I think that we should close Rikers and kind of get healthcare taken care of as far as with the people that are in Rikers, because oftentimes, like I said, people are in there with mental health issues instead of actual issues for crime. So investing in more mental health resources.
Great, thank you. Jordan?
Thank you. It's important to note that no one's going to go into Rikers and come out and improve. It's really hard to go into a place like Rikers and not see things that are really going to switch your paradigm on life. And to expect us as a community, as a city, to use Rikers Island as a mental health facility isn't productive. So I think it's important that we're investing in folks as, they go in before they even get to Rikers, to understand that they need to be trusted. You need to trust the system. They need to be able to go to see mental health specialists before they even get to the point where they're going to Rikers. So we can understand what people need, meet them where they are. And we need to invest, especially in our youth population that, might end up on the track to going to Rikers before they even get there. I think that in Harlem specifically, our schools need to understand this, and to understand that when we are having our students who are on the track, if they're joining gangs, if they're doing anything negative, to make sure that we're meeting them before they even get close to getting to Rikers. And we need to be investing in opportunities so we can make sure that they're getting the help they need before they even get close to getting to the point where Rikers is a mental health facility for them.
Thank you, Joshua.
Yeah, I know people have been on Rikers. I have family that has been on Rikers. Rikers is not a mental health facility by any measure or fashion, right? This is a pretrial detention center where people who are awaiting trial are being detained, right? So Rikers, in its own thing, Rikers has to be closed down just because the facilities, they're not up to date, right? So people are really being detained in Rikers under inhumane conditions, which causes mental health issues, right? Being in those type of conditions for extended period of time, where individuals can be on Rikers for, anywhere up to 2 years, just awaiting trial for a crime that they haven't been convicted yet of, can cause mental deterioration, right? So we have to make sure that we're utilizing our resources, and that's advocating for funds within the state budget to be able to connect people with mental health resources before they get into a position where they end up in Rikers, right? That means getting people off of our subway systems and into care that they need. And this is a budget issue once again, right? New York State is currently closing down hospitals. We're decommissioning mental health facilities, right? We have to be cognizant of that. So we have to advocate in this New York State budget to make sure that we're funding mental health if we're really going to make a true commitment to mental health, right? We're not going to incarcerate ourselves out of this issue, right? Because like I said, we're putting people on Rikers, and just that experience alone is creating increased mental health issues for people who are being detained on Rikers. And then, if they are able to, beat their case, come home, right? That experience alone is having an impact on our population. So we have to invest at the root of it and stop and connect people with service before they get themselves into trouble.
Thank you. How does structural racism play a role in an issue like this? And that how a Khalif Browder can sit in jail for over a year and a half for a backpack, supposedly. How does structural racism play a role in a situation like this? And Jordan, can we start with you, please?
Thank you. Structural racism is everything in something like a story as tragic as Khalif Browder's. I would be remiss if I didn't, mention that, bail should not be used as a punitive measure, something that my grandfather, the late Judge Cut 'em Loose Bruce, was a titan for the Eighth Amendment and ensuring that bail was not to be used as, again, a punitive measure, not to be used to incarcerate folks, but to make sure that you met people where they were with their bail and you didn't have to, and you weren't in a situation where you were overpaying, you couldn't afford the bail, so you had to stay in prison or jail. That's how they were able to make sure you came back. So it's important to understand that structural racism is everything in this, because, other judges in other communities, they would grant bail where their folks could afford them. So it's important that structural racism is noted, that someone like Khalif Browder's situation should never have happened, because it wouldn't have happened to someone who didn't look like him.
Thank you. Joshua?
Yes, structural racism, as we know, is embedded in American society. When we talk about situations like Riker prisons, prisons are a profit generating industry, right? It's not just the prisons themselves, it's the people that are supplying the clothes, the food, the merchandise to our prisons, right? So we have to be cognizant of these things. And that's why bail reform is so important, making sure that people are not being detained and imprisoned unnecessarily, right? Simply because they cannot afford bail, right? So we have to protect our bail reform laws as it pertains to nonviolent offenses. But we also have to make sure that we're keeping an open eye in terms of the violent offenses that we're facing in our community, because we still are a community that grapples with gun violence, right? And it's so important that we make sure that we get guns off our streets, and then we get people who have histories of committing violent crime, out separated from our community, to make sure that, our everyday working class families are safe in the community, right? So there has to be a balance, right? A lot of what we're hearing in the medium is far left, far right. When it comes to public safety, we really need a balanced approach, because we have to make sure that we as a community are not cutting our nose to spite our face, as in feeding into the over incarceration of Black and brown people. But we also have to make sure as a state that we are addressing the real realities of Black and brown communities, which have faced generations of poverty. And we do have violent crime that exists. And we have to be able to tackle that in a meaningful way to keep our community safe.
Thank you. Shana?
Well, to improve the situation, I believe that we must push for policy reforms that addresses the racial disparities in policing and sentencing. I believe it's crucial to provide a comprehensive anti-racism training for law enforcement and criminal justice professionals. I believe engaging communities in dialogues and collaboration can foster trust and transparency. We need to invest in social programs that addresses the root causes of crime, such as poverty and lack of access to education and healthcare, which we know we don't really have in our community, which is essential. Promoting restorative justice practices that prioritizes healing, rehabilitation over punishment, can help build a stronger community. And just supporting grassroots organizations that advocate for this efforts is vital to advancing our racial justice and the criminal justice reform.
Thank you. One of the questions that my neighbors ask me sometimes, with the conversations we have with amongst ourselves, is if the state can afford to have these injection sites, why can't they have recovery centers? Why can't we go to a recovery model? So can you each speak to that, how we get to a recovery model instead of just it almost feels like an extension of keeping people on drugs model. So Joshua, can you start?
Absolutely. I agree with that sentiment. I think, like I said, the opioid epidemic is not just affecting our community or New York. This is a national epidemic. Every corner of the country is feeling this, is experiencing this. And I think, we can't take the approach of, well, we're just going to lay our hands down and say, okay, well, we're going to allow the people to use as much as possible and just try to prevent overdoses, right? I think we have to be more proactive in addressing what is a public health crisis, right? We need more funding in our state budget for, awareness programs, right? We used to have programs like DARE where they would go into the schools and really educate our young people on the dangers of drugs, right? We need to fund initiatives like that again. We also need more, education initiatives within our health institutions, right? When doctors are prescribing certain medication, I think we need more information to go along with it to those patients to let them know the dangers, because so many people are becoming addicted to substances because of they're abusing prescribed medication that they're receiving from their own doctors. And, it's been found, there's been recent cases where it shows that doctors have also been complicit in overprescribing certain medications because there was a financial incentive from pharmaceutical companies, right? So we have to be very proactive in addressing the opioid epidemic. And we're not going to beat this crisis if we just sit on our hands and allow people to use as much as possible. We need to make sure that people are not just surviving it, but they're able to come out of it. They're able to thrive and actually have a true recovery.
Thank you. Shana?
Well, having someone who in family who has, passed away from an overdose, in order, I believe, to transition to a recovery model, I believe we really need to focus on some key areas. First, I believe early intervention, and getting people, to basically get some counseling. But early intervention and prevention efforts, I believe, are crucial. And it starts with including education and support programs, which is aimed at at-risk individuals. Secondly, increasing access to evidence-based treatment options and support services, I believe, are crucial, such as counseling, which is essential. And also what I mentioned earlier is basically adopting a holistic approach to recovery that addresses the physical, mental, and social aspects of addiction is necessary. Because oftentimes people focus on the physical, but they're not focused on their mental, and that's necessary. And so I think by engaging the community, support networks and reduces the stigmas surrounding the substance abuse engaging the community support networks and reducing the stigma around substance abuse, I believe, is vital. And we need to integrate substance abuse treatment into mainstream healthcare centers and systems, which ensures a comprehensive care while also providing long-term support for our relapse prevention, which helps individuals sustain recovery successfully. So prevention is key, and doing a holistic approach is what I mentioned earlier that I really feel that we need to focus on.
Thank you. Jordan?
Thank you. I just want to be clear that whether it's been the recovery model or any other model, if the purpose is to make sure people are transitioning to, recovery, it's just important that these facilities aren't oversaturated in our districts. I think the recovery model would be important, and it would, as a holistically, it might feed better in terms of, helping our community. But, no matter what the process may be to getting to that, it's important that people, again, are recovering in their communities. They're coming where where they're coming from is where they're getting the facilities. And it's important to make clear that this is how we feel, as Harlem. We don't want to be oversaturated with these places anymore.
Thank you. One of the themes that came up at last night's forum, and it seems to be coming up at this tonight's forum, is trauma, how we deal with trauma in our community, how we have young people, particularly coming out of the pandemic. We have young people who, and old people too, but who have seen a lot of trauma in our community. We've experienced, trauma from racism, trauma from gun violence, trauma. How do we get to what are some things you propose, and how how we heal from some of this trauma. And Shana, we start with you.
So I'm really big on mental health, and I really believe, especially in the Black and Brown community, we have a lot of healing that we need for ourselves. And I always tell my friends that this might seem strange, but I say we can't be friends unless we seek counseling and go to therapy. Because oftentimes, especially we as women, we come together and we talk about our issues and problems, but we're not counselors and we're not therapists. So I believe and we have a lot of issue and trauma that we're dealing with from decades and decades. And so I believe it starts with us going to counseling to talk about our issues from someone who's licensed and trained, and not just talking to your friends about it. Also, what I mentioned earlier is with schools. I think that it should be mandated that before the student graduates 12th grade, that they have to have a mental health course and talk to the counselors again, so that it can be normalized at an early age. Counseling is okay, and it's okay to talk to people about your issues and concerns. Oftentimes, people bottle up all of these issues and concerns, and then one day it explodes, and then one issue turns into another issue, and then next thing you know, depression happens and suicide happens. And the suicide rate in young people, I was just on a mental health call earlier today, is at an all-time high. So we have to tackle these issues, I believe, through therapy. And sometimes therapy isn't always for everyone, although I think it's a step in the right direction. But also journaling is one of the ways that I deal with some of the issues that I have. I've picked up anxiety during COVID time. So I had to deal with that. And I have a therapist, and I'm happy to say that I have a therapist, and I'm not ashamed of saying I have a therapist. I think we need to normalize seeking a therapist and a counselor, someone who's licensed and trained to help us with our decades and decades and years of trauma that we have faced in the Black and Brown communities.
Thank you. Jordan?
Thank you. It's important to note that trauma is just another form of systemic racism, given the amount of services that are in our community. Our young people, they see that more than, their cohorts in downtown or other parts of the city or even the state. It's important that we understand that, all this trauma leads to increased stress, increased tension, and increased tension, and who knows where that could lead, the human mind to go next. I support the governor's proposal to put a mental health professional in every school in the state. I think that would go a long way, so we can understand where kids are having problems. We can understand when children are seeing things that, might affect them on the daily. For example, on social media, it's another way of this trauma is funneled. How many of you on this call right now spend hours a day too long on Instagram, scrolling, seeing things that you might not see? I guarantee you, for children, it's worse. It's important to, grab a hold of these things. It's important to understand that it's not helping, that our children are seeing all these, terrible videos on social media at way too early of an age. It's just important that we also understand that, supportive housing models are, again, places where they need to be. Supportive housing is really important when it comes to people, being made whole, living by themselves, understanding that there is help for them if they need it, but they can understand that they can make a life for themselves or their family, and the help is still there when they need it. So I think those are important things when we speak about trauma, and we speak about trauma in our community specifically.
Thank you. Joshua?
I would say growing up in Harlem, I can say the biggest source of our trauma is poverty, right? Coming home and seeing an eviction notice on your door is trauma. Not being able to afford to feed your kids at night is trauma. Losing a child to an overdose because you couldn't afford to send your kids to a rehab program is trauma. These are all the issues that we're grappling with as a community, and we're only going to improve our conditions if we start economically empowering our working class families, right? Our people in Harlem, right? And that starts with utilizing our state budget to make sure that we're investing in the actual people, right? And not just giving away millions of dollars each year to developers and God knows what, right? We've got to make sure that we're investing in the people of Harlem, right? By creating higher wage jobs, better employment opportunities, funding our schools so that our kids can get involved in the new emerging industries, tech, AI. These are the initiatives that we need to undertake to make sure that as a community, we not only just heal by talking and dealing with our trauma, but we prevent this cycle of trauma from continuing with the next generation of Harlem, right? That's how we overcome the trauma of our community, which has truly been induced by extreme levels of poverty and inequality in the tale of two cities, which is New York.
Thank you. Turning to our businesses, our small businesses are hurting also from this, from oversaturation, the oversaturation of these facilities, structural racism and addiction in our community. What plans or what are your thoughts on how we help them to thrive and be continue to be anchors in our community? And Jordan, if you can start.
Thank you so much. Through my work with the council member Yusef Salam, I've been able to forge relationships with many businesses throughout the district, and it's important to know that we need to be able to make them whole again. We need to provide subsidies to make sure that, they have access to capital so they can get off the ground. Because, if you have a great idea, it's really not much without sufficient capital to, help you get started. We need to be, helping them with advertising, letting people know that businesses in Harlem are for Harlem and by Harlem. And we need to let folks know that traveling to Harlem to, come get a cookie at the Harlem Chocolate Factory is worth the trip. And it's important that we're letting folks know that, businesses owned by Black people, specifically Black women, are reputable businesses. It's important that we're letting folks know that we are, we're one community. We're going to keep our dollar in our Harlem community. And I'm happy to have a relationship with the chair of the, MWBEs in the city of New York, the guru, Michael Garner. And it's important that, we have these relationships, so he understands that, when I'm around, it's good to, be able to put businesses his way so that he can give them the advice they need and so they can, begin to thriving in our community. So they're throughout not just our city, not just our neighborhood, but our state. Thank you.
Thank you. Joshua?
Could you repeat the question one more time, please?
Our small businesses are hurting. How do you plan to help them overcome the challenges that are related to oversaturation, structural racism, and addiction in our community? What plans do you have to help them thrive and be anchors of our community?
Absolutely. Our small businesses are so important. I know this, the struggles of a small business as a small business owner who is also MWBE certified. We really don't get our fair share of the state's allotment for MWBE businesses. We've never hit the benchmark, which I believe is 25% of state contracts going to MWBE businesses. So we really need more transparency in the state's procurement process to make sure that RFPs are effectively circulated to small businesses and that they have that fair opportunity to be able to bid and get access to these government contracts, because that has consistently been for small businesses in America, getting access to state contracts, to city contracts has been the way that small businesses have been able to scale and grow and really, take off. And, we've seen that that's just been the history of our city and many cities throughout New York. I also, secondly, want to say that I plan to support public banking legislation in the New York State Assembly. State Senator James Sanders has a bill already. And this would allow us to reinvest our own tax dollars back into communities like Harlem, historically disadvantaged Black and Brown communities, to create new opportunities of access to capital for our small businesses, right? This means low interest loans. This means micro loans. This means interest-free loans so that we as a community can control our future, create more small businesses, and also facilitate more community-centric development.
Thank you. Shana?
So I will say that another one of my platform areas is supporting small businesses. And during COVID time, I started something called a COVID conversation, where I interviewed a number of people in the community. And one of the groups of people that I interviewed was small businesses, and heard the needs of the small businesses. And a lot of them were mom and pop businesses who've been in business for 30 and 40 years. And some of them, unfortunately, when they closed, they weren't able to open back up. So one of the issues and concerns one of the solutions that they were suggesting too is that they wanted city and governmental contracts. And so oftentimes it requires teaching and training and holding seminars and workshops and town halls, because a lot of our small businesses don't actually know the procedure on even how to get governmental contracts with the city. And so I've helped a number of businesses become MWBE certified, but we need more training. And I have been doing a lot of trainings and helping small businesses get these governmental contracts, but we need more training. And to address the issues and challenges of the oversaturation regarding structural racism for the small business, I believe that this involves partnering with stakeholders to identify the areas of oversaturation and developing strategies to make sure that each district has their fair share. These small businesses shouldn't have to walk outside and see our brothers and sisters who are struggling with substance abuse pass out on the streets. So we need to make sure that each district has their fair share. Additionally, I would advocate for implementing policies that promote equity and inclusivity and access to resources, opportunities for our small businesses, particularly those owned by marginalized communities. Combating addiction, I believe you said you mentioned something about addiction, so I want to talk about that really quickly. Combating addiction requires collaborative efforts, working with healthcare providers, community organizations, even law enforcement to provide addiction treatment options. We need more mental health support. I can't harp on that enough. Mental health, and more resources for our businesses affected by addiction-related issues.
Thank you. We'd now like to turn it over to the audience. Sean, what questions do we have in the chat for our guests?
Sure. To follow on with that question about entrepreneurs and small businesses, what about the salaried worker, someone earning a wage? Can you talk a little bit about ways in which you would inform legislation or promote legislation that would support the building of generational wealth for long-term Harlem residents?
And we could begin with Joshua.
Absolutely. That's an excellent question. I think the first thing we have to do is we have to ensure that all New Yorkers are receiving a livable wage, especially, our public sector workers who are, essential. They're essential for our city and state to function, right? So we need to make sure that they're receiving the pay that they deserve, right? And there's several bills right now that touches on these issues. But first and foremost, we need to make sure that our salaried workers' wages are keeping pace with inflation, right? Number two, we also need to make sure that we're not cutting our retirement benefits for our workers, right? There's been a lot of talk about Tier 6 and how it's impacting the next generation of our public sector workers. And it's actually becoming more difficult to recruit people to take public sector jobs because of the reduced benefits, right? So as a democratic state, we call ourselves New York, the champion of democratic values. We've got to live up to that. We've got to make sure that we're investing in our workers and expanding, but not reducing benefits for workers. And lastly, to just add to the home ownership task, I have a lot of experience working with housing cooperatives here in Harlem, preserving them, maintaining them. And that's another program that we need to reinvest in. We need to create more low-income housing home ownership opportunities, right? By revamping programs like Mitchell-Lama, creating more community land trusts within the Harlem community, right? So we have to pass legislation. There's 2 bills right now in Albany to do just that. And that'll be my focus as the next New York State Assembly member.
Thank you. Shana?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yes, for wage earners in the Harlem community, what would you do in order to support the building of generational wealth for long-term Harlem residents?
Thank you so much. Well, one of the things I want to start with our young people, because everyone of our young people, even us as adults, we have a gift, a talent, and I want to utilize that by giving them funding to craft and get skilled on their talent. that they have. So whether that's a young person and we see that they're gifted and talented at cutting hair, I want to give more funding to the small businesses, and in particular barbershops, to basically do some more training courses and hold training classes to our young people. I know there is a barbershop in Harlem, Russ Barbershop, who has a training program for our younger people in our, to basically keep them off the streets, but it's teaching them entrepreneurial skills, and it's teaching them how to develop their craft. So it's basically providing more funding in areas, starting with our youth to basically when they become 18 or even before 18, that they're being productive citizens in society, but that's teaching them the importance of entrepreneurship and having their own, because everyone isn't going to go to college, but we can teach them to be business owners and to develop their skills that they have. Also, I agree with Joshua in regards to housing with more of getting more Mitchell-Lama programs. I do think that Mitchell-Lama, there needs to be more Mitchell-Lama housings. Those have proven to be affordable. And so we need to make sure that our communities get more Mitchell-Lama housing for our community. So our older adults or seniors, as some like to be called, can stay in their homes and age gracefully and not pushed out of Harlem. So, and also increasing our wages. I know our home healthcare workers too are underpaid, and they're taking care of our loved ones each and every day. So we just need to increase, the pay, and also give, so that way, especially with our home health care workers. So we just need to increase our wages.
Thank you. Jordan?
Thank you so much for that question. It's important that, as assemblyman, I'm going to work with my partners in city and state government, as well as, in labor, to ensure that folks in the neighborhood are getting a good start to get a really good, well-paying job, really good, well-paid salary job, protected job, a labor job, which, is a really coveted situation, especially for folks like, black and brown communities like Harlem. If we have people who are working good union trade jobs, they're going to be protected, they're going to be invested in, and there's going to be opportunities for promotions and to move up. So to begin the process of generational wealth, you have to start with, salary jobs, have to start with making sure people know that they have a place to go. And like Shana said, it's important that not everyone's going to go to college. There's a different path for everybody, but we have to understand that as a community, we have to invest in everyone, give everyone an opportunity. So, my partners in labor who've endorsed me, I'll be working with them like Local 79. It's important that they have the opportunity to invest in Harlem so they can, be a part of the projects that are being built in Harlem or being built by people who are from, for, and by Harlem.
Thank you. Sean?
Can you please tell the audience your favorite Harlem cultural institute or entity? And more importantly, tell us what you've learned at that place.
Shana?
Harlem Dance Theater. I love to see our community in the arts dancing. My mother growing up had me in, I don't know if some people on the call know about this, but it was something that we had in Harlem Hospital called Ruth Williams Dance. And I was a part of that. And so I love seeing, dancers dance in Harlem. So really big on, the Harlem dancers, and also the Harlem Jazz Museum, and going to that. So that is a memory that I will always hold, being a Ruth Williams dancer and seeing the dancers in Harlem perform.
Thank you. Jordan?
Thank you for that question. This really strikes near and dear to me. The Student Museum in Harlem, which is currently has a new building being built on 125th Street. Their curator, Thelma Golden, is a titan in not just this community, but this country. She put all the art in the White House under the Obama administration. And what I learned from them is the importance of community. Their artist in residence program is super important to Harlem. It's super important that Everyone understands that this is in the community. It's being built. It will be finished in short order. And I encourage everyone to go visit it and understand that arts in Harlem is thriving. It's important that we understand that, folks in Harlem are doing art in Harlem. So the Studio Museum in Harlem and their Artist in Residence program really taught me a lot about what it's like to be a proud Harlemite.
Okay, thank you. Joshua?
My favorite institution within our community is the Schomburg Center for Research and Black History. The Schomburg is truly a gem. There's so many community events that occur in the Schomburg at their, amazing theater, but they also have so many archives, so much history and resources that you really can't find anywhere else in the world. That I think that's a very special building, very special institution. And I recently learned that something I didn't know, the cosmogram within the Schomburg actually contains Langston Hughes' ashes. And I think that is just something incredible. So I think that the Schomburg is a very special institution in our community, and more people should visit the Schomburg and take advantage of it.
Thank you. Sean?
Thank you. And one final question from the audience is about education. And we understand, of course, that education is primarily dictated by the city, but there are also struggles between mayoral control and the state legislature. Can you talk a little bit about your vision for education in our community vis-a-vis what is possible at the state legislative level?
Jordan?
Thank you. I think it's important when we just think about mayoral control that it's a piece by piece situation. You have it for 2 years. You have to come back. You have to see how it's doing. It's like a report card. You have to understand how you're doing. You come back, get it again, or maybe you get it taken away. It all depends on how you've done the previous few years. In terms of the community education, I was happy to be able to organize a hearing at PS 197 with the education chair, Rita Joseph, for the City of New York, City Council member, and Council member Salam, to hear the issues going on in the city, in specifically our district of Harlem. Parents were able to come out, air out their grievances, talk to the community, or talk to the council members, I'm sorry, because there have some crazy cuts that are happening right now. And again, it's about voicing your opinion, letting the electeds know what the problems are so they can go and fix them. So once again, you have to really take the time. You have to understand it piece by piece with mayoral control. It's important to really take your time when you're doling it out. It's a 2-year process for a reason. And, whenever you have to see how the mayor's doing, and that's how we will decide if mayoral control is important or should be necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Joshua?
In my opinion, we have to do away with mayoral control. We have to create a new framework that can ensure that our public schools are governed and the resources are distributed in a more equitable way, right? The variance in terms of quality from school district to school district in New York City is unbelievable, right? You see the difference just between schools in District 3 versus schools in District 5 here in Harlem, right? So we need to make sure that we're really looking at this from top to bottom to create a new framework to ensure that schools with less funding capability, schools that don't have, PTOs that have, large Rolodexes, are still able to get the adequate funding that they need to provide high quality education to their students. I was blessed to go to Frederick Douglass Academy here in Harlem for middle school and high school here in District 5. And, Frederick Douglass Academy is a very special school. We had a lot of programs and opportunities that many other kids just didn't have. I learned Japanese. The school sent me to Japan with a group of 10 kids just because I did well in the class. They fully funded the trip. I don't know how our principal did it, but he got it done for us, and he exposed us to so many other things, made sure that so many of us, I think we had 99% of our graduating class was accepted to college somewhere. So I think that's important, and we've got to bring back that that funding within the state budget to really fully fund our schools, but we also need to make sure that our faculty are really committed and really engaged in our students and their lifelong development.
Thank you. Shana? Oh, you're muted, dear.
Oh, I just saw that I was on mute. I was just talking. Sorry about that. Well, I kind of go back and forth with this issue, but I guess I'm going to go with mayoral control of schools can actually streamline decision making. It can promote accountability and aligned educational goals with broader city priorities. However, it can also centralize power and limit community input. So, and potentially politicize education. So ultimately, the effectiveness of mayoral control really depends on how it's implemented, I believe, and whether it leads to improved outcomes for the students. And so before I make any political policy or decision, I would bring in the community or the group of people that issue is actually affecting. So I would bring in teachers, principals, students, and parents to gather their thoughts on mayoral control before I actually make a decision that affects the population that it's actually affecting.
Okay, well, thank you all for your answers and your time tonight. We'd now like to ask each of the candidates to please give us their 2-minute closing remarks, starting with Jordan.
Thank you so much once again to the Greater Harlem Coalition, everyone, the MMPCIA, all parties involved, and especially those listening. It's an honor for you to spend your evening, watching us, have a conversation about the future of Harlem. I just want to say, as a grandson of Harlem, I am really, really proud to be able to have the chance to run for this seat. It's an honor of me to have the support of our Assemblywoman, Inez Dickens, our City Council member, Yusef Salam, and our State Senator, Cordell Clear, as we, are fighting to, win this seat for the future of Harlem. I appreciate, the other candidates being here as well. I appreciate the time that we've all taken to once again act and, to be here together. It's important that we're here as family. And once again, my name is Jordan Wright. I'm running for the New York State 7th Assembly District. I hope I can have your vote desperately. If you want to learn more about me, you can find me at my website. That's wrightforharlem.com. That's Wright, WRIGHT, the number 4, Harlem.com. Thank you again so much to the Greater Harlem Coalition, and really appreciate it. And once again, hope I can have your vote. Thank you so much.
Joshua.
First and foremost, I want to thank each and every single one of you for coming out and being a part of this discussion tonight. It's very important as a community that we're engaged and participating in the democratic process, right? Because at the end of the day, it's we, the people, who have the power, right? It's not about any elected official. It's not about any, endorsements or things of that nature, or legacy politicians, right? It's we, the people. We as a community have to become more organized and have to lift our voices if we're going to create the change that we want to see, the change that we've been desperate for decades. So now we have an amazing, incredible opportunity to elect a new generation of leadership to represent our community and really bring a new brand of representation, a brand of representation that is accountable to our community first and not special interests, a brand of representation that is transparent, a brand of representation that walks in steps with the community and doesn't make decisions in silos and in isolation, but makes it with the community. And that is the representation that I'm offering for our community. Our campaign slogan is Harlem for the many, not the few, because we are dedicated and committed to making sure that this Harlem community works for everyone, not just the few people who have benefited from the oppression and systematic disenfranchisement of our community. We're fighting for our seniors. We're fighting for our young people and our children. And we're fighting for our working class families that are fighting every single year to hang on and stay in Harlem. So once again, I want to thank you all for taking the time. My name is Joshua Clennon. You can learn more about me and our campaign at joshuaclennon.com, and feel free to reach out and contact me. My number is 646-415-4578. God bless you all.
Thank you. Shana?
I first want to say thank you so much to you, Savannah, Sean, Sadiria. I think I'm missing Madeline, every single one of you who are watching us, for taking this opportunity of your busy schedules to watch us tonight. I just want to say that I love Harlem and I love being in the community. Even before I was running, people were like, Shauna, you're running like you're a whole politician. And that's just my love from serving the community. And I have a heart for the people in the community and I love listening. And when COVID happened, I made sure to interview several different people in the community so they can feel heard. Because oftentimes our community are tired of elected officials saying one thing and not delivering. And I am a deliverer. I go out there and I hear the needs of the community, of the single moms who say, Shauna, I'm struggling trying to make ends meet. I'm a single mom. I have a 22-year-old son and a 20-year-old daughter. So I know those struggles. Our seniors are like, Shauna, we don't want to be pushed out of our homes. We barely have any money coming in. We need to make sure that our seniors are protected, as well as our small businesses that I mentioned earlier, which shape my platform of mental health, housing the homeless, supporting our seniors and small businesses. I love Harlem and I will continue to advocate for Harlem as much as I can. I am the only candidate that has legal experience who went to law school and got a master's, a Juris Master and a Juris Doctor, who have worked in state government for a previous state senator. So when I get into office, I will hit the ground running. I've already been doing it now, even when I wasn't running. So I ask for you guys' support. And you can find out more about me on my website at Harmongoff for New York. That's Harmongoff, HARMON, the number 4NY.org. And thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you to all the candidates. I'd like to turn it over to Sadiria now to close us out.
That was wonderful. So I think on your screen, you'll see that Sean has put up the poll that I spoke with you earlier about. So now this poll is just for informational purposes. It's just going to help us to understand the community's perspective. Please take a moment, fill it out. All of the candidates are there, whether they're able to run now or not. We would like to hear your voices and hear how you feel about the candidates that are listed on the screen tonight. We're going to send the information out tomorrow via email to let you know who came in first, second, third, whatever, so that you'll have a good idea about our future leaders. So thank you again for joining us tonight. If you'd like to learn more about the Greater Harlem Coalition, look us up. We're at greaterharlem.nyc, or you can email us at info@greaterharlem.nyc. So we'd like to extend our thanks to the Mount Morris Park Community Improvement Association for co-sponsoring the event tonight with us. And thank you also to our candidates, our moderators, and a special thank you to our GHC volunteers for coordinating this forum. So we hope you enjoyed the forum and gained valuable insights into our community future leaders. Thank you for joining us. And again, thank you, candidates, for being here.